Hey friends, this is Whole Earth Discipline. It's an Eco-Pragmatist manifesto. It's how the human species can discipline ourselves and the planet without breaking it. It's also a really great guide where Stewart Brand gives us solutions to combating climate change and also living sustainably as a species on planet Earth. So it's an incredible book. So if you want to learn more about these topics and also learn about how nuclear power reactors can play a big role in this whole equation, you're in for a little bit of a treat. This book is part of the Nuclear Book Club series, a series on this channel where I go through and summarize books related to the topics like nuclear sustainability, nuclear energy, climate change, and many more topics. So without having to spend 15 to 20 hours reading books like this, I do that in less than 10 to 15 minutes. So let's jump into this video. Hey friends, my name is Osama. I have a background in nuclear engineering, and on this channel, I help demystify nuclear technologies by simplifying them. I also like to review and summarize books like this one as a part of the Nuclear Book Club series. So let's jump into this video. All right, so this book starts off with putting the world's environmental crisis into perspective. It goes through so many of the different factors that are impacting climate change and why predicting climate change and the trends that are ongoing at the moment, like increases in worldwide global temperatures and the impacts of this temperature increase, is so unpredictable. He points at why this is the case. So it's incredible to also know how our climate has been affected by extreme events in the past. Like for example, methane that was released from our oceans. It has the capability of destroying our planet as we know it, or ending the lives of large amount of species on the planet. So there are incidences that have occurred in history millions and millions of years ago, which have put the world in an extinction phase. So the author Stewart Brand really reflects on some of these scenarios and explains the unpredictability of the whole situation, which is incredible to get a look at the environmental crisis, our planet, and how unpredictable it is from a very high level. Stewart does a really good job at that. All right, so the very first chapter in the book is dedicated to delving into human nature. And humans, in our very nature, once we get into a specific environment and start immigrating into new areas, we start outstripping the environment of its resources. So we grow, we multiply, and we unsustainably use the resources that are available in the area. So resources can include wood, it can include water, fresh drinking water, it can also include the animals that we're hunting. We as a species are known in terms of our trends for outstripping the carrying capacity of specific environments and then moving on to new ones. And what's scary is that eventually, once we outstrip our environments of carrying capacity, we fight over these resources. So we fight amongst groups in order to win the resources that are left over. All right, so Stewart Brand points at how climate change will outstrip the natural carrying capacity of our entire planet. It will affect various different areas, and because of this, it will result in an increase in global conflicts across the world, which is very scary, but a real reality where we're seeing at the moment, we're seeing conflicts between nations on resources already. And according to Stewart's prediction, this is only going to increase as the impacts of climate change start affecting our planet on a more global perspective, affecting supply chains, affecting agriculture, affecting various different areas. It will only increase in the amount of conflicts in the world that will take place. And this is why the author points at why we need to develop solutions fast for climate change. It's not only resource availability, supply chains across the world, disaster relief efforts, infrastructure, forced immigration, energy security of different nations, but it is also that rise in large-scale conflicts, which is inevitable because of climate change. That's why speed and innovation are needed, and all topics that are discussed in this book. All right, so another really cool topic that this book points at is climate change unpredictability. And like I said before, unpredictability of climate change is due to the various variables that are involved and the whole movement of our planet, the different systems that our planet is sustaining at the same time. And because of this, different areas in the planet will be impacted at different rates. It's very unpredictable, and the feedback loops that are going to be involved are going to make a big difference, and also with significant unknowns. So for example, number one is ice melting in the Arctic. This is going to result in sea levels rising across the world. And this is an issue because, as you know, a lot of the major cities in the world are located on coasts. And once sea levels rise, we're going to have to develop infrastructure and different tactics to keep that sea level rise at bay. Okay, so this is one area which is unpredictable. It can increase at a sudden rate exponentially, but it could also take several years for that to develop. Number 2 is methane being released from large areas which were previously permafrost. There are large areas across the world which in the past had permafrost, so they were permanently frozen, okay, for millions and millions of years. But with climate change, now we're seeing those areas starting to thaw out. Because of the organic matter that's trapped in these areas, it's going to release a large amount of methane into our atmosphere. Methane is a very substantial greenhouse gas, okay, that can have a major impact on climate change in general. Another really big risk when it comes to permafrost is that of virus outbreaks, okay, and this book was written before COVID-19, and as we know, a pandemic and virus outbreaks can have a pretty big impact on our planet, okay? So it talks about how there are certain viruses that may be in this permafrost that humans can get exposed to, or animal life, and create some havoc on Earth. And the third point he brings up is large carbon sinks. So large carbon sinks across the world, like our oceans or even our forests. So he points at the forests. We don't know if our forests will be around by then, okay? Our rainforests across the world, they're being protected by the nations in which are housing them. And it's unpredictable whether these will be around for the next couple decades or centuries or not. For example, with the global temperature rise of simply 3 degrees, rainforests can turn into desert, right? Just like that. There's a lot of unpredictability as to whether these carbon sinks and resources that we have available at the moment will be around for the future. And second to our forests are actually our oceans. So our oceans are the second largest sink for carbon dioxide. Acidification of our oceans really decreases the capacity for our oceans to absorb carbon dioxide. And the reason why is because a really important marine species and animals like coral reefs, algae, and other marine life is being impacted by acidification as well. So that's another big unknown that's there at the moment. I really love learning about the climate change unpredictability aspect in this book because it's informative and really gives a stark reality as to the beast that we're up against. Okay, it's unpredictable and it's volatile. Situations can change very fast in a very short amount of time, okay, and that's really scary, but something that is good to really understand and realize. So another really cool topic that this book touches on is planet crafting and planet engineering. So it's really cool. The concept is that romantics, they love issues, okay? So you're seeing these environmental movements ongoing, and you see that a lot of the folks that are involved are romantics, right? They love issues, they love problems. Now scientists, they love discovering these issues. They also love analyzing them and understanding them. That's the role of a scientist in society, is to observe trends and really analyze them. And engineers, on the other hand, are there to solve them. They're there to come up with the pragmatic solutions that are cost effective, because this is simply not a paper exercise. You gotta actually go out and do it, and also collaboratively, right? How can you do it collaboratively, sustainably? How can you develop teams that are dedicated to coming up with solutions? And what's interesting in this book is Stewart Brand really points at how planet crafting and planet engineering could be a thing of the future, something that we may need to implement. What is planet crafting? What is planet engineering? It's basically implementing really important solutions, but on a large scale. For example, large-scale initiatives like ocean fertilization, fertilizing our world's oceans with iron to reduce algae growth. Okay, so this is something that seems pretty out of the box, but it's something that could be looked into. Obviously, there's a lot of research that needs to take place before a worldwide solution like that can be implemented. But if we were to go down that route, we would need an increased level of international collaboration, international cooperation toward investing, number one, and also dedicating the human resources toward doing this. And third is making sure that we're all on the same table and agreeing to the changes that we're making to our planet, okay, or the risks that we're taking necessarily. So Stewart Brand talks about international cooperation, how important it's going to be in the future. Another really cool idea that Stewart talks about is converting a lot of the residue from agriculture and many of our waste products into charcoal and then burying it. So it's interesting how we're at the moment utilizing fossil fuels to produce electricity and process heat, but the opposite could also be the case, because residue produces a lot of methane. It produces produces a lot of carbon dioxide, which is emitted into the environment. We could potentially try to do the opposite, see if we could do kind of reverse engineer that on a large scale. The next topic I want to talk about in this book is how the author makes a case for nuclear energy. So the author talks about how in the past they were a staunch opponent of nuclear power and really exploring their journey on becoming someone who was very anti-nuclear to becoming someone that is pro-nuclear and the thought processes that went behind that. And also talking about how the green movement was almost like an anti-technology political movement that has almost kind of like transformed into something very dangerous that could really harm our planet rather than actually providing real solutions and pragmatic solutions toward helping our planet become more sustainable, avoid things like climate change. So a quote from James Hansen, which is an American professor that talks about climate science in this book that I found really interesting was, one of the greatest dangers the world faces is the possibility that a vocal minority of anti-nuclear activists could prevent phase out of coal emissions. So in the age of social media, this is a significant reality. So you're watching this video, hopefully I'm making a positive influence on the world through this content. And at the same time, providing educational content that can be used as a resource for our generation today, but also for future generations. But at the same time, social media is a double-edged sword, or the printing press, or many other types of media that are out there. They can help promote and educate, but also provide misconceptions and misinformation to the public, which can really impact policies across the world, because in the world we're living in a lot of democracies which politicians need to make sure that they're aligned with their population's worldview and kind of objectives and goals and missions, right? So it's interesting how influence has a really important role when it comes to the world and the future outlook of what technologies we're going to adopt in the future. So overall, I love the simple and effective way in which this author highlights the benefits of nuclear power. Like, for example, highlighting how, number one, that nuclear waste loses toxicity over time. Unlike waste products from other fossil fuel emissions like coal, mercury, arsenic, there's many things that are thrown right into the environment or have literally polluted our ocean. So when you go out and eat fish, you need to be cautious of the amount of mercury that you're going to be consuming, right? Or for example, pregnant women, they need to be very careful about the amount of fish intake that they're having. This was not the case before the Industrial Revolution. Another really interesting point is that all of the world's resources for uranium have yet to be found. At the moment, the price of uranium is pretty steady. However, as the price increases with increased use, it will lead to more exploration across the world, which is incredible to know. It's a resource that is here to stay, and we need to discover even more of it. There's potential to discover a lot more of it. And next is that nuclear waste, spent nuclear fuel that is used by conventional nuclear power plants, can be used as a fuel source directly for future nuclear power plants. For example, he talks about fast breeder reactors, molten salt reactors, and also gives a bit of solutions and different proposals. For example, James Hansen has also proposed is take the $20 billion budget for spent nuclear waste disposal and really invest that into the new generation of reactors who can use that waste to produce clean electricity. It's an interesting way of looking at utilizing the funds that are already there, the nuclear economics promotes, and really utilizing them to advance a new generation of nuclear power reactors that can use that spent nuclear fuel. I love the idea. It's pretty cool. So what are some of the solutions which are proposed in this book? How can we do all of these things? Well, the author talks about how making nuclear power plants more accessible to the public is a core solution to the issue, right? So he talks about how an example of Sweden, how 1/3 of its population has stepped foot in a nuclear power plant. And because of this, 80% of its population supports nuclear power. So once you allow the public to get a taste of the technology and really immerse themselves into the technology, they become supporters of nuclear power. Honestly, it makes sense that when you expose the public to something that, for example, seems very confidential, very, very sensitive, but you show them as if they're your friend that, look, this is the nuclear power facility, right? It's safe. You can almost eat off the floor of a nuclear power plant. That's how clean it is, the facility. And it's very different from how you may have preconceived notions around it. You will get support for nuclear power. Bring people in guided tours to help them understand that technology. Also, France is another country which is looking at making their nuclear power plants and nuclear power facilities available to the public to tour. So I think that's a really phenomenal way to do that. Hopefully this channel makes a big difference because it helps bring the technology to your fingertips, right? You can watch this on your phone. And I find that simplifying nuclear technology, developing these resources really helps with the public's understanding of nuclear power. Another really cool point that the author promotes is the licensing of nuclear reactors and doing that fast. Okay, we need these solutions, we need nuclear power reactors, and we need to build them on a fast scale. Okay, what's interesting is this book was written in the year 2009, and right now in 2022 we are facing a very big global energy crisis, put into the mix with new transportation technologies like electric vehicles that were not around in 2009 for sure, and also many industries becoming electrified. Promoting a faster licensing approach for nuclear power reactors is phenomenal. It's advice that is relevant to this day. And what's interesting is he gives the example of France and how France was able to reduce its licensing for its reactors from 10 years, usually it takes around 10 years to license a reactor, to that of 4 years, right? And really fast track development of nuclear power resources across the country. He also promotes international cooperation when it comes to fuel reprocessing and explaining that fuel reprocessing of nuclear power fuel, it's quite challenging. And there's a lot of countries across the world that are currently doing it, which is great. However, he talks about developing a centralized approach and strategy so that all of the world's spent nuclear fuel can go into one location and be reprocessed by one country who's specializing in that technology, which can reprocess this fuel and basically ship out that reprocessed fuel back to the whole world. And I think a great country might be France, right? They've done it in the past, countries like Japan, and continue to do it for countries across Europe. So maybe they could be one country. And lastly, this book goes through the concept of the green movement and also the concept of the new green movement. The author talks a bit about how in the past, the green movement was associated with the color green because, plants are green and the environment is kind of associated with that color green. However, he also talks about how this is no longer relevant. It's similar to the relevance of the red communism flag. That is no longer relevant. Also sharing the thought process of how I discussed before, how romantics, they love problems. And the romantics also love world issues. Scientists analyze and kind of delve into those issues, right? Break them down. And engineers like to solve these issues and come up with pragmatic solutions. However, the traditional green movement has transformed into something that is very political, very traditional, and very anti-science. A lot of the environmentalists have become anti-science, right? And this is not only a trend that's happening at the moment. This has been happening in the past as well. For example, the space program, which helped mankind get to the moon, was actually something that was opposed on a very large scale by environmentalists, right? They were saying that, there's no point in investing in getting man to outer space. Rather, we should focus on our Earth. To a certain extent, they do have a point. However, exploring the outer space and getting to that new frontier helps in terms of research, helping us understand the outside world and potentially how we could leverage those resources to help our planet as well. So the author really talks about how environmentalists, they were the ones who actually gained the most when it came to the US space program, because the space program also facilitated and helped mankind put satellites up into space. And because of satellites, now we have new monitoring methods of monitoring our oceans, of the topography of across the planet, understanding our planet more in depth as to in terms of human activity and what impacts human activity are having on the planet. The first satellite images that captured our planet, they brought together around 20 million people to celebrate the first Earth Day, which happened in 1970 and happens every single year. It's one of my favorite days of the year, and it's incredible how a single picture can unite so many people. Stewart Brand really points towards how the environmental movement needs to be led by scientists and engineers. In terms of climate change, we need scientists and engineers to play a really big role. And he also points towards how at the 17th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, they were an essential bastion of power. Every single one of its members was an engineer. It goes to show how China, I don't want to get into politics, but China has been developing infrastructure, has been really deploying these nuclear power plants and really making these pragmatic decisions in terms of what resources to build and develop. And a large part of that has been happening because of its leadership, right? Because a lot of its leaders are those scientists, are those engineers who have that pragmatic view on the world, right? That we need to develop these resources to advance as a human species, and we need to do it sustainably. All right, last but not least, most importantly, I'm gonna share a bit more about how I actually found this book, which was a really cool story. So here I am walking into my public library, which once in a while on the weekends I might drop by, and those bookshelves that have those used books? So I came across one of those bookshelves, and luckily for me, I actually came across this book. It was on sale for $2, right? I was like, wow, it's hardcover. cover. It looks pretty much brand new. Didn't even seem like it had been read too much. And you know, the library had it since February 2010. And I quickly picked up this book, and you know, after purchasing it, I looked it up on Goodreads and I saw that, wow, this Stewart Brand, who's the author of this book, is the founder and editor of the Whole Earth catalog. So I was really impressed by that. I was like, wow. And also a few of my friends in the nuclear energy space had actually read this book as well. Okay, that's the advantage of Goodreads. You go there, you can check out what your friends also read. So, and the third part was how this book captures the relevance of nuclear power, nuclear technology. Incredible how Stewart Brand, who's the author of this book, also had the chance to work in the Canadian nuclear energy industry or contribute as a consultant to the Nuclear Waste Management Organization and many other organizations as well. So really interesting how the book has that Canadian relevance and also that relevance to nuclear power, and also to the fact that go to your local library, right? Pick up some of the books that are out there and maybe even explore some of those used books. I think they might hold some really cool gems, like just like this book. So that's what I recommend. Check out your local library this weekend if you're up for it. And lastly, if you want to sip on a wealth of information related to climate change, the human species, and really get a deep look into some of the world's most pressing issues, I recommend this book. It's published in the year 2009. However, it's still relevant to this day. In the link below, you can find a link to an Amazon link where you can purchase this book, right? And really support this author. Also, just a heads up, this book also goes through many other topics. For example, the importance of cities and how cities make our entire planet more sustainable, and many other topics that I didn't get a chance to summarize in this book. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and really hope you get the chance to check out some of my other videos in the Nuclear Book Club. You know, some of my favorite books like The Case for Nuclear Power or The Case for Nuclear Energy, Seeing the Light, which is a great book which goes through nuclear power technologies. Also a book summary of Bill Gates' How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, which is another incredible book that's written by one of my favorite innovators and influencers, Bill Gates. So hope you get a chance to check that out. But I really hope you enjoyed this video. Get a chance to check out my channel, click subscribe, and support this channel and what I'm doing here. Thanks for watching. Till then, take care. See ya. Bye.